This is Ed Morrissey, managing editor of HotAir.com, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios deep in the heart of Texas. Thanks for being with us today. Got a lot of things to talk about. Joe Biden on the campaign trail. We're going to get to that in just a moment. Just to do a recap of a couple of key stories. First off, sudden movement in the generic ballot. If you look at Real Clear Politics, suddenly Republicans are skyrocketing, Democrats are declining. We are shocked to find that pollsters reaching the end of this cycle are starting to try to reflect reality in their final iterations of the generic ballot. Right now, you've got Republicans at the highest level they've been all year, 48.1% on the Real Clear Politics aggregate for the generic congressional ballot. Democrats are now dipping downward. They're at 44.8. That is a 3.3 lead for Republicans. This is on a metric where Democrats really have to be around a D+4 or a D+5 just to break even. There's all sorts of structural reasons for that. It has to do with polling. It has to do with the fact that these are congressional districts rather than states. Nevertheless, a Republican lead in any way, shape, or form is bad news for Democrats, and the way that this keeps expanding is even worse news. Monmouth came out yesterday with their latest poll. Republicans up 6, 50-44, and even the YouGov poll, which is a very Democrat-friendly poll, came out, I believe it was either yesterday or the day before, Republicans +1. The only Democrat lead on any of these is from Politico/Morning Consult, which was a registered voter polling report. And you may ask yourself, why is Morning Consult still reporting registered voter results, not likely voter results? Well, your guess is as good as mine. I have a pretty good sneaking suspicion, though, that the likely voter modeling that they would use would show Republicans with a fairly significant lead. And so registered voters it is. They are still in their RV. They are still tooling around the country in their RV rather than in their LV. So these are the things. This is the environment that we're going into here in the final couple of weeks. Hugh Hewitt's out in the Battleground Talkers tour, which is a great way to absorb what's going on out in the country. But you can see this. You can see this in the economy. You can see this in turnout. You can see this in how people are responding to the candidates. And almost all of that news is good news for Republicans. So much so, I would add, that Joe Biden actually went out in the campaign trail yesterday to fight for an embattled Democrat who normally would not even be a close race. He's in Pennsylvania, of all places, where Josh Shapiro has got a 7-point lead in the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania over Republican Doug Mastriano. But John Fetterman is descending very quickly into a virtual tie or worse against Dr. Oz. And Joe Biden showed up in Pennsylvania to campaign for John Fetterman in a campaign decision that I am still scratching my head over. Literally scratching my head over this one. Why John Fetterman would want Joe Biden to show up when Joe Biden is as deeply unpopular in Pennsylvania as he is practically everywhere else.
He's at 38 in Pennsylvania, right?
It depends on which poll you're talking about, right? He's 38 in some polls. I think in civics he was 37% or 36%. I think the best of the polls showed him down 8 points, job approval rating, I should say, down 8 points in Pennsylvania. And that was, I forget which poll that was, but I mean, that was the best of them. He is not a popular figure. So he shows up to campaign for John Fetterman, who apparently never even opens his own mouth. And you'll notice, Dwayne, where was Josh Shapiro yesterday?
He was not there.
He was as far away from Joe Biden as possible. I'm not sure where he was in the state, but wherever Joe Biden was, I think Josh Shapiro was on the other end of the state. He didn't show up for this rally, which was supposed to be about the bridge collapse.
Supposed to be an infrastructure thing.
It was an infrastructure thing, right? So Joe Biden shows up. John Fetterman isn't taking questions. We should just go to that one, that particular cut first, because I think this is one of the most telling developments, I guess you could call it, from yesterday's appearance in Pennsylvania. Giselle Fetterman actually had to intercede on behalf of her husband when reporters took the liberty of asking him a question at his own campaign event. Let's go to cut number 10.
Mr. Fetterman,
no.
are you satisfied with the progress of the bridge?
All right.
We're here to celebrate. We're not here to answer questions.
We're here to celebrate. We're not here to do interviews, I think is what she said.
Says John Fetterwoman.
John Fetterwoman.
No.
The de facto candidate, Giselle Fetterman, is the de facto candidate. Rolling Stone declared her the de facto candidate last weekend, and so did Joe Biden.
Yes.
Let's go to cut number 8.
And John, thank you very much for running. I really do appreciate it. And Giselle, you're gonna be a great lady in the Senate.
What?
What? Wait, play that back. Who's going to be a great what in the Senate?
John, thank you very much for running. I really do appreciate it. And Giselle, you're gonna be a great lady in the Senate.
Doing what?
A great lady in the Senate. She's not running for office. She's not in the Senate.
Is she going to have an office? Is she going to have floor privileges?
Well, I think
is she on a committee?
I think the implication here is that John Fetterman is running. Thank you for running, so that Giselle Fetterman can actually perform the duties.
It's like thank you for running past tense. Like thanks for handing the baton off to the real candidate. We're going to try and it's like they're trying to do a Torricelli in real time on the fly, as though
this isn't even a Torricelli. This is an Edith Wilson. This is not a Torricelli. They're not actually changing the candidate. This is an Edith Wilson.
Yes,
they're plugging the wife in. As and this has happened before, but usually you at least go through the motions of electing the wife, right? Where you've had somebody who's been term limited or who's been bounced out of office for corruption, and they run the wife, even though it's very clear it's the former,
like Mary Bono
governor.
After Sonny Bono died. That kind of thing.
Well, no, but I mean Mary Bono I think Mary Bono was her own woman, though. I mean Sonny Bono had passed away.
Yeah,
I'm talking about in Texas. I can't remember the name of the governor, but the governor got thrown out of office for corruption, so they ran Ferguson. I think it's Ma Ferguson ends up being governor, and she's taking orders from her husband the whole time, and everybody knew it. This is in like the mid 1930s, right? This is the same time as the Bonnie and Clyde, is when they took down Bonnie and Clyde, because she was involved in that reluctantly. So I mean that's what this is, and it's not even going through the motions of democracy here. They're running this guy as a stalking horse.
But when is the last time that a professed candidate for office did not speak at his own rally?
And I mean this is weird, right? The whole thing is weird. If you're going to do something like this, it should be so that you could show that John Fetterman is actually recovering. I mean, there was this note from his donor doctor, right? The donor doctor's note said, "Oh no, he's recovering. He's doing very well. He's fully capable of doing the job." Literally the next day, he shows up at a rally for his own campaign and doesn't say a word. Won't interact with anybody. Won't interact with the reporters, let alone the voters that are showing up there, and his wife is pushing them off. I mean, that is a very strange setup. Now, I mean, the whole thing is a strange setup. We're going to be going over, there's more to go over in this hour. We're going to go over much more from this later in the show. But the whole thing here is very strange. First off, it's strange that Joe Biden shows up to campaign for Fetterman in the first place, because Joe Biden is doing terribly in terms of job approval, and everybody else in the campaign, in the Democratic Party, almost everybody else is running away from Joe Biden for that reason. And John Fetterman is not in a position of strength. It's not like John Fetterman's up by double digits and he wants to help lift up Joe Biden, because that would make a little bit of sense if Shapiro did it, for instance.
The race is a dead heat right now.
Right.
It's a straight up.
I think that their polling is showing that he's losing, and that's the reason why they brought Joe Biden in.
I think so too. I think it's undersampling, but the polls are saying it's a straight up tie. You know that Oz is probably up by 3 or 4.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. This is Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios here deep in the heart of Texas. We're going to step away from the campaign trail for just a moment to talk about movies and maybe a little bit about politics with my friend Christian Toto of HollywoodandToto.com, at HollywoodandToto on Twitter. And Christian, always great to talk to you in the morning here.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Christian, before we get into the hot movies that are coming up this weekend, because that's really what everybody wants to hear about, I do want to ask you, though, about the turnaround in fortunes at Netflix. Now, Netflix had gone sort of the way of Hollywood in general, pandering to a woke crowd, starting to lean against some of its content providers who were getting crosswise with progressive audiences. And then in the middle of all this, and I think it was really Dave Chappelle's courage in this, Netflix really turned around and said, you know what? We're not going to pander here, and if you don't like it, you don't have to work for us, and if you don't like it, you don't have to subscribe to us. And a very odd thing happened at Netflix. Now, analysts aren't necessarily linking these two things, but I would call this a really fascinating coincidence that just at the moment that Netflix decided to dump woke, it stopped going broke.
Yeah, the numbers are interesting. They've been losing subscribers in recent months, and their stock prices have been hammered as a result. But the newest numbers are they've gained subscribers. Now, a lot of those gains are overseas, not in America. But there was a very modest increase here. But also, I think they got to stop the bleeding. And I think it's important that from their brand's point of view, that they kind of take this approach, because a lot of companies are either not doing it or even going in the other direction. So I think that Netflix did the right thing by saying, hey, we're going to stand up for our artists, for free speech, for creativity. And like they told their employees in so many words, pound sand if you don't like it. I mean, there was a lot of hullabaloo when Dave Chappelle had that special late last year. So it's an interesting turn of events, but I have to say, reading comments on social media, people are reacting to my website stories, there's still a lot of animosity for the past positioning of Netflix. So I think they've got some more work to do, but I think they're in the right direction.
Well, I think they're in the right direction. And look, I mean, reputational changes are slow. They're always slow. Yeah. And I think that, when you burn people, it takes a long time for them to extend any sort of trust or benefit of the doubt. And I get that. But I mean, I think if you look, and you made this point to me actually offline, if you look at what they're actually producing and putting on air, or on stream, I guess. We say on air. We mean on stream, of course. I mean, I think that there's a lot there to laud in terms of corporate courage.
And I also don't think that people on the right want a monolith as far as the content that comes into their homes. It's not like, well, they had this one new show and it had a left-of-center comedian. How dare they? Well, no, it's they want a variety of voices on there, and I think that's important as well.
Well, I think it's because we're used to having to live in a heterodox society, whereas maybe the left isn't quite so used to it, right? I mean, I think that's real. I mean, I'm laughing here, but I can't. I mean, I'm a lifelong conservative, and I can't remember a time when entertainment choices weren't, from center left to all the way left, with very, very few exceptions. We celebrate the Dennis Millers and the Norm Macdonalds to some extent and that sort of thing, but I mean, when I was growing up, there was an awful lot of, Robin Williams, God bless him, and Whoopi Goldberg, and every other comedian up there would be, bashing on Republicans, bashing on conservative values, and you just learn to live with that. I don't think that the left has learned to live with heterodoxy very well.
Yeah, I mean, remember when Jon Stewart appeared on Stephen Colbert's show and said something akin to, well, maybe that lab leak theory has some merit, and everyone freaked out because there was a different point of view on that show. They were shocked, and I don't blame them because you never get that. So that's why the reaction was so profound.
And the Trevor Noah thing recently, where he went after Joe Biden for his age and competency, and then the next day announced that he was actually leaving the Daily Show. I don't think that was a coincidence either. But I don't think if he was planning on, he left on his own volition, but I don't think he was planning to stick around. He would have been telling those jokes in his final few weeks. So, but. Christian, we do want to get to a couple of the movies this week. Black Adam is one of them, and that is, of course, the newest superhero model movie with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who's just incredibly likable at the box office. This is an incredibly likable sort of celebrity. Does Black Adam live up to the billing?
It doesn't. It's not a bad movie. I enjoyed myself. It's breezy. It's light. It doesn't take itself seriously. But, I think he's been playing superheroic figures for so long. It's like, well, let's put him in a superhero movie. He looks the part. He acts the part. Let's kind of complete the circle. But this character is complicated. He's kind of an anti-hero. You don't know whether he's good or bad. I don't think even he knows. I think that is interesting, but I don't think it's really fully developed in the movie. Also, as I'm watching Black Adam, I'm thinking, oh, I've seen that before. I've seen this before. I've seen that element before. It feels very recycled, and I think that's part of the problem here, too. So it's fine. It's, it'll kind of scratch the itch if you're a superhero fan, but I don't think it's nearly as good as we hoped for. And also, DC comic movies have been very all over the map. Some are pretty good, some are lousy, and I think this continues that sort of inconsistent pattern.
Isn't it based on the Suicide Squad platform too? Viola Davis is in it, and I'm thinking that's a really odd platform to base tentpole movies on, because the Suicide Squad movies were just terrible. They're terrible movies.
Yeah, listen, I think that DC comic movies are desperately trying to replicate the MCU model, where it's a shared universe and the characters appear here and there, and there's consistency in the storytelling. They don't do it nearly as well as the MCU did a few years ago. So they're trying. You can see the flop sweat, but it's there.
All right, Ticket to Paradise. You got George Clooney, Julia Roberts, two of the most likable box office draws probably in history, together again. I'm not even sure they were together before, but at least together in this instance. How does that play?
It's interesting. I'm so used to rom-coms that are insulting, that are chock full of gimmicks, where the writing just makes your teeth hurt. And this is none of that. It's actually charming. It's light. It's enjoyable, and there's a little bit of sadness built into it. It's about they play a married couple. They've been long since divorced. They fight like you wouldn't believe, but they have to come together briefly because their daughter is getting married, and they want to stop it because she's too young. This is too impulsive. She's not ready. They don't want her to make their mistake. And of course, when they get together and they're trying to help the daughter, some of the old feelings are rekindled. This is pretty good movie making. Some of the dialogue is smart. I really like the chemistry between Clooney and Roberts. And it's an older romance. It's not sort of wacky and silly. It's actually kind of thoughtful. And I like that element about it as well. It's not rushing into this joke and this gag. So I think it kind of lets itself breathe. You've got real movie stars here with definitely charisma. And it's not great. It's not When Harry Met Sally, but it's enjoyable. And there's great scenery here as well. It's set in Bali, but it's not really shot in Bali, but it looks beautiful wherever they shot it. And I think if you miss old school rom-coms and don't want to be insulted, it's not a bad choice.
Well, I mean, again, I think it's a question of what's out there competing with it at the time, too, in terms of the rom-com space. But, I mean, am I correct that this is the first time the two of them have been paired together in leading roles? I know that they appeared in the same movie together in Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, but I'm racking my brain and I can't think of a movie that they were partnered off like this, and I'm not sure why that wouldn't have been something that wasn't tried to do 15, 20 years ago. I mean, it would almost make sense. These are two real big box office draws.
Yeah, Making Up for Lost Time. I believe they may have appeared together in the Ocean's films. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh, yes, they did. Yes, they did.
Back. It was,
That's
it
true.
Was an ensemble. So, but yeah, there's something about movie stars. No, I think the big question though is, do people care anymore? I mean, are they going to come out to see movie stars? A few weeks ago, we had Amsterdam, which had every movie star on the planet, and it flopped in spectacular fashion. So, I think the public is in a different place when it comes to the movie stars. We think they're beautiful. We might follow them on Instagram sometimes, but I don't think it necessarily puts the fannies in the seats, but we'll see this weekend.
Well, I think you're looking at two different types of audiences here. Ticket to Paradise, I think, is an audience that has to build itself. Rom-com audiences are out there, but I think it has to make a sale. Black Adam is in a space where people are already part of that whole comic book universe sort of thing. So I think they've got a more built-in audience there. We'll see how each of those perform, but we will have to see how well that holds up by what the deal that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets for Black Adam 2 whenever that comes.
That's right.
Christian Toto from Hollywood and Toto. Thanks for staying with us today.